Welcome to the Del training series on ADA compliance. This video will provide an overview of the accessibility requirements for pedestrian connections. Street-level pedestrian connections are comprised of typical elements. Each element has its own unique accessibility requirements. They are listed here and will be explored in more detail in this video. All pedestrian connections are required to be contained wholly within the width of the pedestrian street crossing served. This includes the side flares. Pedestrian connections must include a turning space where a pedestrian may change their primary direction of travel to enter or exit a pedestrian connection. The need for a turning space is often avoided with blended transitions, because approaching pedestrians often do not need to change direction to enter the sloped segment. All other element requirements applicable to pedestrian connections also apply to blended transitions, such as width, cross-slope, detectable warning surface, and clear space requirements. The turning space is required to be a minimum of 4 feet by 4 feet, and is required to have a maximum running slope and cross-slope of 2%. The turning space is required to be 4 feet by 5 feet minimum at locations where the turning space is constrained. The 5 feet dimension shall be provided in the direction of the pedestrian street crossing. A constraint is any feature that projects more than 2 inches above the pedestrian access route surface. Without a turning space, users must turn while climbing. This is a difficult maneuver, poses an accessibility barrier, and does not comply with the ADA. Non-compliant curb ramps without a turning space may be retrofitted by adding a turning space behind the curb ramp as shown here. Without a turning space, pedestrians continuing along the sidewalk experience severe cross-slope, causing a loss of stability and control that could even risk overturning. Curb ramp facilities are to have a maximum running slope of 8.3%. However, when chasing grade, the running slope length need not exceed 15 feet. This means the ramp slope may exceed 8.3%, but the slope must be uniform for the full 15-foot length of run. This isn't allowed for blended transitions. They are to have a maximum running slope of 5%. While allowable for curb ramps, long steep slopes can be challenging for the user to maintain control and stability of their wheeled mobility device. Loss of control on steep curb ramps can be dangerous on sidewalks without buffers because it leaves no room to recover an errant wheelchair. Flared sides are required at locations where there are elevation differences between the pedestrian connection and the abutting pedestrian circulation path. Returned curbs, or 4-to-1 tapered curb with stabilized turf, are permitted when the grade change does not abut a walkable surface, such as at a buffer strip or when street furniture is present. Side flares are not part of the pedestrian access route. Side flares must be sloped no greater than 10% max. Returned curbs provide useful directional cues when aligned with the pedestrian street crossing. Del prefers the use of side flares so as not to catch snowplow blades. Additionally, flared sides on diagonal curb ramps are required to have a segment of curb 24 inches long minimum, located on each side of the curb ramp and within the marked crossing. Curb ramp grade brakes must be perpendicular to the direction of travel. Grade brakes on blended transitions should be made perpendicular to the direction of travel when possible. Grade brakes that are not perpendicular and are skewed to the direction of travel can result in a loss of control and stability for people using wheeled mobility devices. Notice the pedestrian turn to his left to square up with the skewed grade brake. Both wheels must meet the brake at the same time to maintain wheel contact and traction with the surface. As with other elements of the pedestrian access route, Vertical surface discontinuities create accessibility challenges and are to be avoided. The effect of vertical surface differences to the mobility device user is even more pronounced at street-level pedestrian connections. Pedestrian connections already are challenging to negotiate because of the ramp and turning maneuvers required. When vertical differences are encountered while also maneuvering over grade and cross-slope changes, the combination has the potential to compromise the dynamic stability of the mobility device. Accordingly, grade breaks within pedestrian connections are to be flush. All vertical surface discontinuities are limited to 1/4 inch maximum. Pedestrian connections are required to provide a minimum width of 4 feet. Reductions in width below 4 feet are not permitted. Cross slope is the slope perpendicular to the direction of travel. The type of traffic control used at the intersection will control the required cross slope of the street crossing, which in turn will control the required cross slope of the pedestrian connection where they meet. For example, at stop or yield conditions, the street crossing is required to be 2% max, so the pedestrian connection must match that rate. At signalized or uncontrolled intersections, the maximum cross slope is 5% in the street crossing, so the cross slope on the pedestrian connection must also be at a maximum of 5%. Mid-block crossings may use cross slopes in the crosswalks and pedestrian connections that match the roadway profile grade. The counterslope is where the downward sloped segment of a pedestrian connection meets the upward sloped gutter pan or roadway pavement. The slope of the gutter pan or the street at the base of the pedestrian connection may not exceed 5% max to prevent the creation of a potential accessibility barrier. A clear space of 4 feet by 4 feet minimum is required beyond the bottom grade break of pedestrian connections. The clear space is to be coordinated with the pedestrian crossing so that it falls within the crosswalk. For diagonal type curb ramps, the clear space must be outside the active lanes of traffic, which functions like so. The purpose of the clear space is to avoid conflicts between users of the pedestrian connection and drivers. Here we see the potential conflict of not providing a clear space due to improperly locating the curb ramp. A curb ramp without a proper clear space risks directing a person using a wheelchair into the path of a car driving legally within their travel lane. Pedestrian connections are required to be designed to prevent the accumulation of water. Facilities that collect water and which do not have a means to positively convey water create operational difficulties during and after a storm event. Adjustments to existing drainage must be considered within the context of the project scope. Detectable warning surfaces are required at pedestrian connections which connect to a pedestrian street crossing. Detectable warning surfaces provide both a visual and tactile cue for pedestrians with visual impairments. Visually, they must have high contrasting colors with dark on light or light on dark. Tactilely, they must have truncated domes so that they can be felt underfoot. More information on detectable warning surfaces are included in a separate video in this series. We hope you found this video helpful in explaining the accessibility requirements for pedestrian connections. Please consult with DelDOT's ADA Title II Coordinator for accessibility guidance on your project.